The top story this hour: Ethiopia says mission to undermine the unity and territorial integrity under the guise of humanitarian concern is not acceptable. Union calls for more action to fight AIDS amid COVID setbacks. Hello, this is Addis News Hour. I'm Solomon Daniel. Thanks for joining me. Ethiopia says a mission to undermine the unity, territorial integrity, and the cohesion of the Ethiopian state under the guise of humanitarian concern is not acceptable. Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Demeke Mekonnen said Ethiopia is disappointed by the campaign that's being waged against its handling of the situation in the Tigray region. Jerusalem has more.
According to the National Disaster Risk Management Commission data, food and non-food items have been delivered for 4.5 million beneficiaries in the first round and have been delivered for 5.2 million beneficiaries in the second and third round. About 170,798 metric tons of food, which costs 5.4 billion birr or 135 million USD, distributed so far to the Tigray state. In general, humanitarian partners cover 84.95% of the woredas and address 91.3% of the food supply and distribution, whereas 15.05% of the woredas and 8.7% of the food supply and distribution is covered and addressed by the government of Ethiopia. However, huge campaigns by Western powers and representatives of global actors are being waged against Ethiopia's handling of the situation in the Tigray state. That's why, in a pre-recorded video message Saturday, the country's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Demeke Mekonnen reacted against these campaigns.
Ethiopia stands ready to work positively and constructively with all its partners to scale up humanitarian assistance, rebuild social cohesion, and restore basic services in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. Therefore, what the country needs at this critical moment is the support of friends and partners and not uncalled for pressure that would complicate the situation further. What is saddening is the attempt to dictate terms to the country in ways that are not helpful. We do not consider this a friendly act. That is why the Ethiopian government cannot be expected to accept with equanimity this condescending approach. We are indeed disappointed by the campaign that is being waged against Ethiopia.
Demeke also urged the international community and partners to be part of Ethiopia's effort to return the humanitarian situation in the region into normalcy, that engaging on unhelpful activities under the guise of humanitarian concern.
It is extremely regrettable to see that some within the international community have embarked on a mission to undermine the unity, territorial integrity, and the cohesion of the Ethiopian state under the guise of humanitarian concern. We urge these individuals and partners to desist from these unhelpful activities. In this regard, accusations leveled against Ethiopia of using hunger as a weapon of war on its own citizens is an egregious falsehood and in no way calculated to help foster peace, harmony, and stability. It should be noted that in the first round of humanitarian response, effort was made to reach out to 4.5 million people in the Tigray region through the delivery of food and non-food items.
Ethiopia has a firm stance to work together with all its partners to scale up humanitarian assistance, rebuild social cohesion, and restore basic service in Tigray state. However, some actors have attempted to smuggle weapons to arm the terrorist cell under the name of humanitarian assistance, Demeke noted.
The Ethiopian government has not only demonstrated its willingness and commitment to work with the international community to respond to the humanitarian crisis in Tigray, but it has also provided full and unfettered access for humanitarian actors to operate in all parts of the region through a simplified blanket approval process. In the areas where safe movement of humanitarian cargo are strained, military escort is offered as a matter of last resort to reach those in need. In this connection, we wish to point out here that we have credible evidence indicating that some actors have attempted to smuggle weapons to arm the terrorist cell under the guise of humanitarian assistance. This is unacceptable.
In response to the situation, since the outset of the law enforcement in Tigray, the Ethiopian government has been working aggressively to accelerate the humanitarian response to reach out to every person in need, he said.
The Ethiopian government is using every ounce of its strength to mobilize all the necessary resources from within the country to reach out those in need, but its resources are limited. This is where the support and solidarity of the international community becomes all the more critical. We are grateful to those who lent a helping hand in this regard. We wish to reiterate once again that the Ethiopian government remains ready and committed to work closely with those partners willing to engage positively and constructively to protect lives and livelihoods.
Currently, 6 operators, namely World Food Programme, World Vision, Care Relief Society of Tigray, Food for the Hungry, and the Ethiopian government are providing food assistance in the region.
A delegation led by Minister of Peace Mufarat Kamil has handed over Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's message to France President Emmanuel Macron. President Macron's Special Advisor on African Affairs, Frank Paris, has received the Prime Minister's message on behalf of the President. In the discussion between the two sides, Mufarat gave a briefing on the multifaceted reforms that Ethiopia has been undertaking since the ascent of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed to power and the results achieved thus far. She also spoke in detail about the situation in Tigray region, with a special focus on the efforts of the federal government in rebuilding the region, apprehending criminals, and supporting the ongoing independent investigations on alleged atrocities in a bid to return the region to normalcy. Mufarat has also appeared before the French Senate and explained the foundations that the current Ethiopian administration has been laying so far to build a peaceful and developed nation. Former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs Tibor Nagy said he's Ethio-optimist and expressed the importance of enhancing economic relations between Ethiopia and the United States. His remarks came during a virtual business forum organized by Embassy of Ethiopia in Washington. On the webinar, Ethiopian Ambassador to Washington, Fitsum Arega, briefed the participants on the various business and investment opportunities for American companies. He particularly mentioned Ethiopia's wide-ranging economic reform, a historic telecom liberalization initiative, and the 10-year National Development Plan that has been recently adopted. Ambassador Fitsum also spoke about the abundant investment opportunities available for U.S. companies in various sectors in Ethiopia, such as agriculture, manufacturing, tourism development, ICT, energy, and mining. He also stated the government's unwavering commitment to supporting the private sector. Former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs Tibor Nagy also mentioned his strong confidence that Ethiopia will come out of the current challenges and continue being a key economic and security ally to the United States. A Pan-African researcher says U.S. accusations of Ethiopia are all a pretext. The U.S. may reconsider the sanction, assuming the joint role it's playing with Ethiopia in the fight against terrorism. Sintayo Tamrat reports.
Malit Ayele is a Pan-Africanist researcher on African and Middle Eastern studies based in the Netherlands. Reflecting on the U.S. sanction against Ethiopia, she said the U.S. sanction is an attempt to further maintain upper hand in the Horn and East African region, following the geopolitical shifts in the region.
We cannot deny that there is this geopolitical shift in the region, in Eastern Africa, and every powerful Western country wants to keep an upper hand in the region, making sure that countries are servants to their will. At the end of the day, what they want is to have that servant leader in the country.
The researcher says U.S. government accusations of Ethiopia are all pretext. Behind the sanction are interests to meddle with the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the TPLF clique, and the like internal affairs of Ethiopia.
All what U.S. has been accusing Ethiopia is a pretext to what I said before, meaning U.S. actually is observing under its own eyes that Ethiopia is becoming an independent. In terms of independence, of course, it has been independent all along, but in terms of empowering itself, in terms of economy, it's on the verge of that. It's becoming independent country to become the regional powerhouse of the East Africa. So it's a pretext of using TPLF. Also, when it's not only TPLF, by the way, on the agenda, they also want to meddle in the issue of the second filling of the great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam.
She says the US may reconsider the sanction, assuming the joint role it is playing with Ethiopia in the fight against terrorism in Eastern Africa.
Hoping that this diplomatic relationship will be maintained with U.S., unlike U.S. who kind of torn apart and throw it under the carpet the 100 years of diplomatic relationship with Ethiopia in 100 days, I don't think this travel sanction will be furthered to more sanctions. I do hope that U.S. will look at internally and examine the decisions that it's passing and how it's going to affect the United States in its role in the Eastern Africa, because it's not just U.S. giving to Ethiopia. It's also Ethiopia giving something to America. It's not just U.S. Giving aid to Ethiopia or something. Ethiopia also has been giving literally the lives of its soldiers.
The U.S. has so far unilaterally sanctioned a number of countries in Africa, Latin America, the Caribbean, Middle East, and Far East, as well as Europe.
Russian ambassador to Ethiopia compliments Ethiopia's stance to fill the second phase of the GERD and calls on the African Union to negotiate the three countries with the principle of African problems by African solutions. The ambassador said the African Union should struggle to mediate the dispute to move the continent forward. The international community to interfere is irrelevant, he added. Kasan Jane reports.
Ethiopia and the downstream nations have been at loggerheads since the inception of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Notwithstanding the fact that Ethiopia has endeavored time and time again to familiarize Sudan and Egypt, that the project does not cause any significant harm to them. The downstream countries, however, have been persistently turning a deaf ear to the lectures and moving the situation into uncharted territory. Over this issue, Russian ambassador to Ethiopia says African Union negotiation is the most appropriate way to mediate this dispute.
As we understand it, the African Union is the most appropriate organization which is able to mediate for the three countries. Firstly, the African Union, more than any other organization, is familiar with the peculiarities of the problem, the positions of the parties, their fundamental differences, as well as the situation in the region as a whole, taking also into account its historical development. That's why it is difficult to imagine any other structure with authority at this level suitable for the role of mediator. We believe that the potential of the African Union as the mediator in this dispute is far from being exhausted. Of course, if negotiations in this format reach a final deadlock, the parties may have to look for other mediators, but the main condition for their choice should be the acceptability of a candidature for all the three parties, without exception. And in addition, when choosing mediators, their competence should be taken into account, as well as their known neutral position in the dispute. So at this stage, we strongly support the continuation of the African Union's role as the main mediator in this dispute.
Ambassador Vani further underscored to move forward what is needed is to engage in good faith in the negotiations over the dam under the auspices of the African Union.
Everyone must realize that the situation in the Horn of Africa and with it the lives of millions of people depend largely on the course and outcome of the dam talks. I'm ready to repeat once and again Russia's position on this issue. It remains unchanged. There is a need to find a mutually acceptable solution through dialogue between all the three countries, taking into account the interests of each party and with strict observance to the international law. Dialogue on the distribution of waters of such a vital river as the Nile can't be conducted by methods of pressure, blackmail, or threats. Nile is the commonwealth of the free states and their peoples, and it should serve for the good of the peoples concerned and not be an apple of discord among neighbors. We are in favor of continuing negotiations. We see them as the only possible and legitimate way to mutually acceptable solutions. We believe that no one other than the Nile-fed countries themselves can find the right solution. On the contrary, we deem that a surplus of advice from the outsiders can cause imbalance in the negotiation process. That is why we believe that the parties should refrain from emotions or any external influence or pressure and should continue the negotiation.
Recognizing that the Nile River is a commonwealth and lifeline for all of the three countries, the ambassador appreciated the win-win scenario Ethiopia is offering. In connection with the Russian National Day 2021, the ambassador mentioned his embassy has received congratulatory messages from senior government officials of Ethiopia, and he reiterated the commitment of his country to enhance partnership with Ethiopia in multifaceted areas.
Policy Matters is a conversation platform which aims to provide reasoned analysis and context to the activities, reforms, and policies of the federal government of Ethiopia. Exploring various reforms the government is undertaking, the conversation platform aspires to enable nuanced and informed understanding.
So once the proclamation was enacted, the next phase of the work was establishing Ethiopian Communications Authority from the ground up. This started with really establishing the institution independently to make sure that it's accountable to the Prime Minister's office, but at the same time have independent board members.
Now, the bid, as I mentioned, is over 8 billion over a decade. and it reflects the highest FDI investment to Ethiopia. What really stood out?
This process will create over 1 million, from 1 million to 1.5 million new jobs.
Now, we've also learned that the sale of the second telecom license will be postponed and re-auctioned in the coming months. Can you help us understand what drove that decision? And in your response, maybe also touch on the announcements around infrastructure and mobile money deployments.
The North Star is for the government to continue to open up the sectors that would allow further economic growth, and allow the entrepreneurial spirit of the youth is fully captured in a formal sense, whereby they will be able to generate revenue for themselves, but also for the government through tax.
Deputy Chief of Somali State Mustafa Mohammed sends a message to regional states to learn from the way Addis Ababa city government is trying to develop a sense of ownership of the city among all Ethiopians. Abdamon Shagrizmo.
The State of Somali Development Association annual conference has been held in Addis Ababa. Speaking on the occasion, Somali State Chief Mustafa Mohammed said, following the ongoing massive reform in the country, the state of Somali has gained in the democratic, political and economic fronts. He also sent a message to regional states to learn from the way Addis Ababa city government is trying to develop sense of ownership of the city among all Ethiopians.
After Adanesh Abebe was appointed as Deputy Mayor of Addis Ababa, she has been undertaking remarkable activities that make all nationalities and peoples of Ethiopia feel as owners of Addis Ababa. Thus, I want to extend my appreciation to the Deputy Mayor of the city.
Mustafa calls upon all regional states to undertake activities to boost unity and solidarity.
Taking good lessons from Addis Ababa and implementing it in various regional states to further strengthen similar activities to solidify national unity. I personally believe that we have to undertake activities that practically show all regions are owned by all of Ethiopians. The State of Somali Development Association is using the land provided by Addis Ababa City Administration to promote Somali's culture.
The Addis Ababa Deputy Mayor Adanesh Abebe, for her part, said Addis Ababa is the capital of all Ethiopians and the city administration is seriously working to ensure this. The Deputy Mayor stresses the people of Somali has been sacrificing in the nation-building process. The Somali Development Association has received land from Addis Ababa City Administration to construct cultural center in the capital.
Ethiopians have long been known for their courage and defiance against foreign enemies. By way of warming up for a fight and showing their readiness, Ethiopians brag about their strength, their mercilessness against the enemy, and so on and so forth. Thus, Ethiopians do the battle cry while walking back and forth. A typical battle cry, or shillala, is done with the sword on one hand. Alternatively, others carry both the sword and the shield during battle songs.
Welcome back. You're watching Addis News Hour. Provisional administration of the Mekelle city allocates 405 million birr to beef up access to electricity at the outskirts. The project is set to benefit some 19 outposts around Mekelle, the capital of Tigray regional state. Alula Taklemaram tells us more.
The ongoing electrification in 19 outposts around Mekelle city is part of the agreement signed some 2 years ago between the city administration and Tigray Region Electric Service. The 405 million birr project is set to be fully funded by the city administration. Some of the villages have already got electric service. CEO of the interim administration, Abraham Belai, visited the site to express his emphasis for the speedy completion of the project.
There was power interruption for some times because of the security situation in our region, but now we are installing it. We have 19 outputs yet to get electric installation. 7 of them have already been inaugurated in the first phase. This project will benefit over 25,000 people.
Quality has been given due attention during the installation process, according to the electric service of the region.
We consider corresponding infrastructural development when we design the electric installation to reach out the village, and we prioritize quality to avoid such recurrent power outages. All you see here are concrete poles. We are trying to finalize the project ahead of its intended plan.
Beneficiaries express gratitude for the service they are getting and seek betterment in other areas of infrastructure development.
We are very happy for getting back our electric service. We can now enjoy the service. In addition to the electric service, we need betterments in modern water supply and road infrastructure.
Over 100 electric transformers are destroyed in Tigray due to the conflict, it was learned.
Ethiopia's launched cholera vaccination in Tigray, targeting 2 million people with 4 million doses to prevent cholera outbreak in the region. The inoculation is based on provision of oral cholera vaccine. The campaign encompasses provision of hygiene and sanitation materials for enhanced prevention. Vaccines are provided by the International Coordinating Group on Vaccine Provision through the Secretariat of the Global Task Force on Cholera Control, with operation funding by the Vaccine Alliance and technical and operational support from the World Health Organization. This is Addis News Hour. The United Nations General Assembly has overwhelmingly approved a declaration calling for urgent action to end AIDS by 2030, noting with alarm that the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated inequalities and pushed access to AIDS medicines, treatments and diagnosis further off track. The declaration made late on Tuesday contains targets for countries to reach 95% of those in risk groups with HIV prevention options and to provide 95% of those who know they have HIV with a treatment. It was adopted with 165 votes in favor and 4 against, following objections to the text by 4 countries: Russia, Belarus, Nicaragua and Syria. Amidst the fallout from the COVID crisis, the world could even see a resurgent pandemic. Executive Director of UNAIDS, Winnie Binyama, said at a high-level meeting in New York. But a never-ending HIV pandemic is not the fate, she said. Even in spite of all the setbacks, AIDS as a public health threat can end by 2030, as promised, if the world comes together, she reaffirmed. Before we go, a quick reminder of our top stories. Ethiopia says mission to undermine the unity and territorial integrity under the guise of humanitarian concern is not acceptable. UN calls for more action to fight AIDS amid COVID setbacks. Well, that's it for the news from me, Solomon Danya, and the rest of the English team here in the studio. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.